Go over the real estate transfer disclosure statement, CAR form TDS. Now keep in mind, this is one of the most important forms in the disclosure process, and it has to be filled out by the seller. No other circumstances allowed. Now we will fill out this first part here and also a couple items on page 3, but the most important thing is the seller must check the boxes where appropriate and also check yes or no on disclose. Now keep in mind, this is not a contract. This is for informational purposes only. However, seller must disclose any material facts or deficiencies they know and are aware of in the transfer of real estate. Now, this is it is illegal to transfer property without this form, with the exception of 3 things. Number 1, if the home is in a trust with a successor trustee, you are exempt from this form. Number 2, probate. Anytime that it goes through probate, that they are exempt from this form. And number 3, an REO, which own property, does not have to use the TDS. So those are the 3 exemptions. Otherwise, a for sale by owner, an investor, a flipper, even if you bought it as an REO, after you remodel it, rehab it, and resell it, you do need to prepare a TDS. So very important form. It's actually one of the most common forms to get in civil court a dispute about, because a lot of times it is disputed about undisclosed items, and the judge will refer back to this form. So just wanted to stress the importance of that. So let's get right to it. The statement here, the disclosure statement concerns real property situated in the city of blank, county of blank, state of California, described as, and this is where you'll put the address. Now, this is the only area that you can fill out this form on, okay? This and some areas on page 3. But the seller technically is supposed to fill out and do the checking of the boxes wherever appropriate, whether it's in person and you hand them the pen and just go over it with them that way, or when you send it over online, you might want to walk them through it. Now, this form needs to be back, and it needs to be sent over with all the additional disclosure forms within 7 days of the executed contract. And that sometimes is an issue with listing agents. They have to chase down their sellers or don't prep them and tell them about this form beforehand, and then they end up scrambling within that 7 days. So a good time to get this form done could be at your listing appointment when you get the RLA, the residential listing agreement, signed. You may just want to have it prepared and go over right on the spot. Or if you don't want to go through that, then when you take your profession and you come back, that might be a good time to get in front of the seller as well. Or let's say you hold an open house the first weekend it hits the market, and you know that's going to be within your 7 days. So however it may be, just make sure that you tell the seller about this form and its importance to get back to you. So the real estate transfer disclosure statement, also the form SPQ, seller property questionnaire, is something they need to fill out as well, and we'll have a separate video on that. So again, we are on page 1, and here is a little bit of legal jargon. So it says, this statement is a disclosure of the condition of the above described property in compliance with section 1102 of the Civil Code as of date. Now, this will be the date they are filling out the form, not to be confused with when the executed contract date is. Date that you're filling out this form. It is not a warranty of any kind by representing any principals in this transaction. And it is not a substitute for any inspections or warranties the principals may wish to obtain. So just basically a legal disclaimer at that point. Next, coordination with other disclosure forms. So again, this talks about how it's part of civil code and a little bit of another legal disclaimer here. So the first area where the boxes need to be checked, you will see on page 1 of this TDS, is there's 3 boxes over here. You're going to always want to check the top box. Reason being is because you are going to disclose a natural hazard disclosure over to the buyer, an NHD, California law. You have to give them that. So with that, it is technically an inspection report. So you will check the top box here, inspection reports completed pursuant to the contract of sale or receipt of deposit. So because NHD, that will be checked there. In the second box, additional inspection reports or disclosures. This would come into play if you did a Section 1 pest inspection up front, or let's say you did a home inspection and had one on hand, you can always add it to this disclosure here. And lastly, no substitute disclosure for this transfer. Prior to when we didn't have the NHD, then you would typically check this box, but at NHD, top box there. So let's move right along. Number 2, seller information. Okay, this is very important stuff here. The seller discloses the following information with the knowledge that even though it is not a warranty, prospective buyers may rely on this information in deciding whether and on what terms to purchase the subject property. Seller hereby authorizes any agents representing any principal in the transaction to provide a copy of this statement to any person or entity in connection with any actual or anticipated sale of the property. So the next box here, and it's also just going to give a legal disclaimer, would be seller is or is not occupying the property. A lot of times we see this check. This is not checked off and it is missed very commonly, like the top 3 over here. So make sure you check if they are occupying or they are not occupying. Also, keep in mind, just because they're not occupying the property does not indemnify them any less, or it can't be a reason for them not to be able to fill this out just because they have limited knowledge or not actually occupying it. So same legal ramifications, whether they're occupying or not. So here are some of the items that will be transferred with the sale. One thing to keep in mind is, let's say they checked rain gutters here and there were no rain gutters. Your seller wouldn't necessarily be on the hook to absolutely be demanded by law to install rain gutters. Yes, it was probably a mistake. And at that point, you could amend your TDS and check the appropriate box. So let's get right into part A of this, arrange. A lot of people don't actually even know the difference between a range and oven here. So a range essentially is just like a cooktop. You see it oftentimes in custom homes. An oven is just that. Oftentimes in tract homes, we are seeing freestanding ranges, which has the oven and range together, also kind of known as the potbelly range there. So those go together. If you do have one of those freestanding ranges, which are very common, you'll check range and oven, okay? But if the home has a separate oven, an in-wall unit, and then the range on a cooktop, that's the difference there. Now, one thing I do want to mention about those freestanding ranges, if it's been modified, cut into the cabinetry with typically the microwave or the hood above it, that's a fixture. However, if the freestanding range is just sitting on the property, you must disclose if you are taking that, or if you are a buyer and you are trying to acquire that. So keep that in mind. Next on this list, microwave. If it's built-in microwave, then it's a fixture. If it's a countertop microwave, it is personal property. So keep that in mind. Dishwasher is usually modified into the cabinetry, which usually ties into the disposal. So that's a fixture there. So just mark if dishwasher is coming with the property. Trash compactor is not too common. You might see this in some custom homes, but it's in a separate electric unit that basically breaks down the trash. A garbage disposal, you'll want to check under the kitchen sink if it has a disposal. And while you're down there, just check for that board on the bottom of that to make sure that there hasn't been a history of leaks or have any dry rot. Washer and dryer hookups. You'll want to be mindful if it does have these hookups, usually found in a laundry room or in a garage or a separate area. You also want to see if it has the 220 plug or it has gas or possibly both. If it has gas, you'll see that it does have a gas line to it. Rain gutters, you want to see if the home is going to come along with rain gutters. You may even want to ask them, is it completely working? Any leaks? Does it have all the downspouts? Those are just things you'll want to ask them. One thing I want to mention here, if there's any deficiencies in these items that we are going to be transferring over that we have knowledge on, we would disclose it right here. It gives us 2 lines. Now, if it goes on further than that, we need to describe more deficiencies. Then you could do one of 2 things. Once you keep typing, it's going to come up with what's called a TOA, a text overflow addendum, and it will just give you more area to complete your sentences. Or you could put C addendum and create a separate addendum attached to this TDS, and that would be right here. More commonly is people would just type away, and once you get here, that additional TOA form will begin to populate. So keep that in mind. Now, we were at burglar alarms. You want to see if the home has a burglar alarm, but moreover, you want to ask them, hey, are you in a lease? Do you owe anything on that alarm? Those are just things you'll want to know to see how they're going to handle that during the transfer sale. Will it be paid off? Do you plan on paying it off? Do you need to try to find a buyer that will inherit that? Those are things we want to know. Monoxide detectors, smoke detectors, those are California law, so those sellers are on the hook for doing those things. Fire alarms aren't too common. Sometimes you may see them with burglar alarms, so if it does have a fire alarm in the home, we'll just go ahead and check that box. TV antennas, it's not too common nowadays, but people oftentimes leave them on the roof. So if it does have a TV antenna and they don't plan on taking it down, you must check this box here and also disclose if it's not working, again, down at the bottom of page 1. Satellite dish. Now, satellite dish typically will stay with the property. Usually with DirecTV or some of these big providers will say, leave the dish, take the box. Okay, so if you're leaving the dish, just go ahead and check that box up there. Intercom. Intercom got very popular in 60s, 70s, 80s, up until the early 90s. And so some homes may have them in there. And if they do, go ahead and check that box. Also make sure that they are working as well. If they're not working, let's go ahead and disclose that. More times than not, when I'm seeing homes with intercoms, those intercoms are not working. So that should be disclosed. Central heating, central air conditioning. Pretty straightforward. Evaporator coolers, known as swamp coolers. Does it have a swamp cooler? One of those where you put the water in and it pushes the water. So just see if it has that, or central heating, central air conditioning. So up here, wall window air conditioning. It's in the wall and it's been modified and retrofitted into the wall. That is a fixture and it must stay. If it's been retrofitted into the window and customized, it must stay. But it hasn't been retrofitted and they're just putting a wall unit right by a window and just shutting the window to it, then that's personal property. So just be very mindful of that. But a lot of times those are in the wall. If they were to take that out, it would leave a complete hole in the wall from interior to exterior. So that would be an issue. So it is a fixture. Sprinklers. Does it have sprinkler system in it? Does it have sprinklers in the front and backyard? If it does not, you'll want to disclose that. Let's say if it does have sprinklers in the front but not in the back, go ahead and check sprinklers. Disclose down here, does not have a sprinkler system in the backyard. Public sewer system, pretty straightforward. Or is it a septic tank? If it's a septic tank, you may want to ask them a couple questions. Hey, do you have a certification? When's the last time it's been serviced? Where is it located? Those are things that you'll want to know when you take a listing. A sump pump. A lot of people don't know what a sump pump is because that's more geared towards a basement and homes with basement, trying to get the moisture and the water out of the basement. We don't really see those often at all. And here in Fresno, there's basements may be big, but it isn't too common. So you don't see something. Water softener, though, is something you need to be mindful for. It is a fixture because it does tie into the plumbing system. Now, you also, a lot like alarms, want to see if it's leased or sold. There's a lot of salesmen out there that have upsold homeowners on these type of items. Patio and decking, just ask them, hey, was it permitted when it got done? Do you have any knowledge on that? And when you are doing your inspection, look for dry rot or any wear and tear on it that you would need to disclose. Built-in barbecue is tied into the gas line, so that's a fixture. Just make sure if they have knowledge on it, is it working? All burners good? Just kind of go through it that way. Gazebo, awning, pergola, whatever you may call it, does it have it? Anything that we need to notate about it? A security gate, does it have that? A garage, is the garage attached or not attached? Not attached would mean a completely separate dwelling where oftentimes you have to walk out of the home and then walk into the garage. When it's not attached, usually through the kitchen. Carport. Does it have a carport? Automatic garage door openers. Does it have it? And if so, how many number of remote controls can we be expecting when we are transferring this property? A sauna. Some custom homes have sauna, not too common, but if it does have a sauna and it's present, go ahead and check that box. Hot tub and spa, same sort of thing. Just make sure you know the difference between a hot tub and a spa. And oftentimes we see jacuzzi, but remember, jacuzzi is just a name brand for a spa, a lot like Kleenex for tissue paper, okay? So a hot tub typically found in the master bathroom. Can it have jets? Can it not? Yes. And then a spa is usually on the outside and doesn't have a locking safety cover. So moving along to the third column over here, a pool. Does it have a pool or not? Does it have a child-resistant barrier? This is something that you need to be very careful for because there's certain rules for it to become a child-resistant barrier. It has to be a certain height, has to have a self-closing mechanism on it, has to be not in a position where it can open very easily. So things like that. So if you're not sure, don't check that box. Just check the pool. Pool spa heater. Well, does it have that? Is it gas? Is it solar? Is it electric? Same with the water heater. Is it gas? Is it solar? Is it electric? Make sure the water heater is double strapped per California law due to earthquakes. Moving right along now to water supply. Is it city? Is it well, private utility, or other? If the water is on a well, you need to ask a little bit more questions of how deep that well is, where does the water sit, how deep is the pump, have you had it certified, any issues? Those are things you'll want to know because a buyer will want to know that. Gas supply, is it utility? Is it bottled tank? What we see out here is propane, same thing. Hey, is it leased? Do you own it? When's the last time you filled up the tank? Anything we need to know about it? Those are questions you need to be asking your sellers. Window screens. Does it have all window screens present? If not, you want to disclose that. Are there any rips in the screens? If so, disclose that. Window security bars. This one's a little bit tricky. Under that, you'll see quick release mechanism on bedroom windows. Now, it's going to be an issue, and it's a fire hazard and a health and safety issue if the security bars do not have a quick release mechanism on them. So you must tell your seller they have two options. You either can remove the bars or you need to install a quick release mechanism on the bedroom windows. You got to give them the option. You can't just say, hey, go ahead and take those bars off that window because it's not going to pass inspection. Then you tell them to do that. A week later, someone goes, robs the house through the window. You told them to take the bars off. You have an issue. So just give them the option on that. Our last box here in column 3 is water conserving plumbing fixtures. Now, anytime a home has been updated or anytime that you've probably changed a faucet, that would be a water conserving plumbing fixture. It has a screening or a change out of toilet. Nowadays, they're low flow toilets. So most homes and most products on the market today are water conserving plumbing fixtures. So this box essentially should be checked. Exhaust fans, you need to notate are located. Typically, we find them in the bathrooms and in the kitchen. 220 volt wiring. This is different than 110. 220 is usually a 3-prong, where the older ones have 4 prongs. And where are they located? If you see one of those 220, those black receptacles in the laundry room, then you can disclose it there. Oftentimes, it's also in the kitchen too, because you'll tie in the range or the oven into it as well. So you would mark that there. Fireplace. Does it have a fireplace in living room or family room, so or master bedroom? So notate where they are located. Is it gas starter? Check the roof. Obviously, it's going to have a roof. What type is it? Is it composition? Is it ceramic tile? Is it wood shingle? You'll want to put it here. And the age, even if your seller doesn't know, just try to be approximate when you put that there. And anything else you need to notate. And again, on this paragraph, to the best of your seller's knowledge, any of the above that are not operating condition, yes or no. So if they are not, go ahead and check here. The key to this is operating condition. Now, something can be operating, but not at 100%. For instance, if we had a range with 4 burner tops on it and one of them wasn't working, but you could use the other 3, it's still technically operating. So the way you want to answer this is rule of thumb. If it's not operating at 100%, then go ahead and disclose it. Okay? You want to be safe than sorry. And so that is page 1 of the TDS. A lot of good information on there that you need to go with your seller over these things. Or if you are on the buyer end and you do receive this from the seller within 7 days, You need to go through this with a fine-tooth comb and explain everything that is disclosed on here. Buyer and seller both need to initial page 1. So moving along to page 2 of this 3-page document. Property address will populate over. Once you put that date on the form where it is being filled out, it'll populate over here. And part B, are you seller aware of any significant defects, malfunctions in any of the following? Again, the key word is aware. There may be deficiencies that you are not aware of, but if you are aware of, please disclose them and don't turn a blind eye either. So you would mark that here, any of the check boxes, and then you would describe any of the defects or malfunctions right here. If you needed more space to describe these things, a TOA will come into play, or you can always put C addendum. Just legal information, if you want to go through that. It also just talks on water current serving plumbing fixtures and just kind of legal notices in this paragraph here. Moving on to box C, page yes or no questions. Anything here that's answered yes needs to be explained down here, okay? And again, you need to get more information up or put C addendum. So here they have 16 questions to answer. Number 1, substances, materials, or products which may be environmental hazards, such as, but not limited to, asbestos, radon gas, lead paint, mold, fuel, chemical storage tanks, etc. You would mark here yes or no. Most of these are going to be no, but go through them. So number 2, a lot of times actually is going to be yes, because features on the property shared in common with adjoining landowners, such as walls, fences, and driveways, whose use or responsibility for maintenance may have effect on the subject property. Very common is you share fences, okay? People share fences. And it's a mutual expense. It doesn't matter which way the boards are facing. It's a mutual expense when you share it with a neighbor. So this should be yes, and you'll mark down here fences. Sometimes you'll see it check yes, and they'll circle fences, which is okay, but technically anything yes needs to be disclosed down here. If there's any encroachment, easements, or similar matters that may affect interest in the subject property, you would check yes or no here. Room additions for 4 and 5, they're asking if they're made with necessary permits and if they are in compliance with building codes. So those are items you'll want to check yes or no when you do ask the seller. Fill, compacted on the property. Was there any fill, such as, did we fill a swimming pool or any area where you would need a compact soil? Flooding, drainage, or grading problems. So here you will need to, if you have flooding, grading, or draining problems. Now, if it has drainage that that comes towards the foundation of the home, then you will have to disclose that. Number 9, major damage to the property or any structural from fire, earthquake, floods, or landslides. That's something big. So if you had a past issue with that, you need to disclose that. Any zoning violations, non-conforming uses, violations of setbacks, which you would mark yes or no here. Neighborhood noise problems or other nuisance, you would check here. Barking dog, annoying neighbor. Now be very careful on that, because this is a matter of opinion. Something that bothers one person may not bother the other. So you'll just want to make sure that you, disclose properly on that. CC&Rs or other deed restrictions or obligations. Now, this is typically in a condo or an HOA unit, okay? Number 13, homeowners association has the authority over any of the subject properties. We will want to know that. Any common areas such as pools, tennis courts, walkways, or other areas co-owned or undivided, yes or no? Number 15, any notices of abatement or citations against the property. And lastly, any lawsuits against the seller. A lot of times ex-spouses end up going after, put a lis pendens on the house, and we need to know that. So you need to make sure that you talk to them and make sure that there's no lis pendens or active lawsuits on the property, because that can halt the sale of your property. So again, you'll need to put any answers to yes right here. Okay, now we're going to move to page 3 of this document, and seller, this is where they will sign right here. Okay, and then agent's inspection disclosure. This was where you will do your avid. If you don't do an avid, you will check this box, and then agent notes the following items. You can mark down a few things here. We'll talk about the avid if you want to make it part of this contract, or to do an avid, to not do an avid. We'll go over that on a later seminar here. So this is where you'll also have the agent sign their name, and then they also will sign their signature here. Agent inspection disclosure to be completed by the agent here. So who's obtaining the offer? A lot of people get confused on this. This is the buyer's agent here, okay? Obtaining the offer. So just keep that in mind. They'll mark if they're making the avid part of this contract or no notes for disclosure. If they do an avid, must be dated the same yes, simply because it becomes part of that document. Agent would put their name here and sign here. And then lastly, the seller and buyer have areas that they will sign over here as well. Okay, there's another legal disclaimer here that we can go through. And so you'll need their signatures here again, and again, the agent's signature down here. Okay, basically, let's just go ahead and read that one. Buyers and sellers may wish to obtain professional advice and or inspections of the property and to provide for appropriate provisions in a contract between buyer and seller with respect to any advice, inspections, defects. So we're all acknowledging that. And here again, lastly, is just a legal disclaimer that these contracts are made up to in accordance to section 1102.3 of the Civil Code, provides a buyer with the right to rescind a for at least 3 days after delivery of the disclosure, if delivery occurs after the signing of an offer to purchase. If you wish to rescind the contract, you must act with the prescribed period. So any mandated disclosure such as this TDS, you have 3 days to rescind the contract, not mutual agreement. You can just cancel the agreement if you got this disclosure and don't like anything about it, or if something on there made you feel uncomfortable. You can just cancel the contract. You will rescind it, and it will cancel escrow. Now, getting your deposit back has to have mutual agreement, so just keep that in mind. When you, if they don't sign the cancellation, then we don't have mutual agreement. Then it would have to either be worked out, or a judge would talk about, you know, who the deposit goes to. So that was quite a lot. That's why I wanted to go through this thing practically line by line, because the real estate transfer disclosure statement, knowing the TDS, is the most important document in the disclosure process when we're transferring property in California. So I hope this was helpful. Make sure that you go through it with your sellers very thoroughly. Make sure before you even take the listing, you prep them on this document. And lastly, if you have buyers, when you get sent over this document, make sure you're going through it line by line, word for word, so you don't miss anything and they understand what's being disclosed to them. Thanks for tuning in. More videos to come.